Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. So one of the biggest problems to a lot of people when it comes to gardening and growing their own food is access to space. So what this video is about growing food in small spaces in really tight locations. So come and have a look at this. So where I grew up, we had a small tiny concrete yard, and this is the way we used to grow food. So I'm going to show you exactly the methods that we employed to grow food and how to maximize space so you can use it in the best way possible. The thing about this method as well is it's on a really low budget, so it's almost for free. If you haven't got homemade compost, you might have to buy a little bit of seed sowing compost, but apart from that, most of this stuff is free. So being on concrete means that we can't dig the soil. We've got no soil to dig, so we're going to have to build up if we want to grow. Now, I've found these containers that are really useful. These are warehouse totes, so when they get cracks, when they get broken, people throw them away or companies throw them away. You can recycle these and get them for free and use them for a growing project like this. Another really useful resource when it comes to this kind of gardening, people renovating the homes and throwing the bathtubs away, we can give them a new life. Now, what I meant to do last year was reshape this bathtub and sort of disguise it so it doesn't look like I've got a bath in the middle of the garden and look unsightly. I'll do that this year, and I'll do it again. I'll use free resources to do it. I've got a few troughs that I've already set up, and I'm going to show you exactly how I've set these troughs up. Because what I did was I was a little bit more prepared than I normally am, and I set these up, at the start of winter and let them all bed into place, and now I'm away to get planting. I've got a little wooden planter here, and again it's made out of just offcuts of 2x4s. In it I've got tulips and I've got peacock lilies. Once the tulips are flowered and they die down, we'll cut them back, and the peacock lilies are a lot thinner. They're a lot thinner, so they'll grow tall, and that'll form my little canopy layer in this trough, and the underplanting will be formed by the spinach. It's a good way of planting a mix of ornamentals and edibles at the same time. A lot of permaculture focuses around theory. So what I wanted to do with this was I wanted to focus on practicalities and how you can grow food and make little changes in a small environment. I am a bit of a squirrel, so I do squirrel resources away. So whenever I find little bits of rubbish that people are throwing away, then I'll pick them up and bring them back. I mean, I haven't bought flowers for a long time, but this is a perfect seed starting tray or perfect tray to pot up in that I found for free. So the good thing about this is you get a chance to pick up some of the plastic that's blown in. And there's always plastic being blown in. All that rubbish that we've blown in, or we've just swept up, mostly it's organic matter. So there's little twigs, there's bits of bark, there's bits of cardboard and tissues and stuff. The plastic obviously we'll take out, but the rest of the stuff we can use. We don't have to waste that. So this container is about 1.5 foot in length, about 14 inches, 16 inches wide, and about similar sort of height. Now to fill that with compost, you're going to need a couple of bags of compost. And if we're talking compost at today's prices, it's like £6 or £7 a bag. We're talking £14 just to fill that container with compost. Now, I don't think you need to spend that sort of money. There's lots of resources that you can use to fill that for absolutely free, and you're spending minimal amounts on compost. When you're growing in containers, one of the biggest problems you're going to have, especially when it's dry, is moisture retention. So we're going to set this container up with that in mind. So we're going to think about fertility over the longer term, and we're going to think about moisture retention over the longer term as well. So I found a bit of cardboard that had blown in. I'm going to use that, and we'll cover some of the holes on the bottom, because these containers came pre-drilled with holes. Now, if I was going to set this up, instead of drilling holes in the bottom, I would have drilled holes across the side, and that would have allowed the water to drain out the side, and it would have held enough in the ground or enough in the bottom to almost act like a reservoir, and the rest of the soil would have wicked it up, and then your plants could have held on to that moisture for a longer season. But we've got the container as it is, and we're going to work with what we've got. 14 inches of container, and I've used about 3 inches of wood chip at the bottom, so it's a good amount already filled. All that organic matter that's blown in, so leaves, bits of tissue, things like that, cardboard, that's all going in there as well. Now, when you're setting this up, think of a compost pile. When you set compost piles up, you want to set them up you know, with the right carbon to nitrogen ratio. I know there's a lot of detailed science behind it, but when it comes to practicality in a small garden, we don't have to be exactly precise, okay? So that's some carbon material there. Now add on some nitrogen. I went to the local donkey sanctuary, and they've got a problem where they can't get rid of their manure. So I go and I bring it and I rot it down here, and then in a year's time I've got fresh compost, or fresh well-rotted horse manure, you know what I mean. So in the meantime, I'm going to take this old, or this pretty fresh manure, and I'm going to set up a compost pile here. As you know, manure is a very nitrogen rich resource, but the good thing about this is it's got a lot of straw mixed in, and if I'd have left that, that would have made some nice compost on its own because of the bedding material that's already in there. Watch out for weeds that you're pulling in. See, now we're a third of the way up the container. We've got manure in, we need to put some more carbon material in. Here we go. And this is straw. It's scrap straw, so stuff that my chickens have bedded on. So it's not got a lot of manure in there, i.e. chicken poo, but it's straw that they've bedded on. It's not going to be used for anything else. It'd normally end up on my compost pile, or I'd use it as a mulch. But so we've got carbon, we've got nitrogen, we've got carbon. And the next thing to go in is a load of kitchen scraps. So it doesn't matter what you're putting in, just get it all in. So this is just whatever has been used over the last couple of days in our house that's going in. I haven't planned it, so I don't have specific types of kitchen scraps. There's citrus in here, potato peels. One warning about things like potato peels is they have a tendency to sprout sometimes. But the way we peel them, I don't think they're going to sprout. Fingers crossed though. But if we get some bonus potatoes, then we get some bonus potatoes. What can you do? That's the thing about when you're growing food. Sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's just about having that opportunity to just have a go. And that's one of the things that sometimes in permaculture I think we lack a lot, is we focus so much on being so professional and so accurate and so scientific. Sometimes we just miss that. Let's just experiment and have a go and see what happens. Pretty unbroken down compost. It's still in its composting stage, and it will take a while for it to break down, but I want it to break down here, so that's going in. So you can see there's a lot of woody material, there's a lot of leaves in there, even a mango seed. Now what's going to happen with that is your plants it's going to break down over time, and it's just going to turn into compost. It's just an active compost pile that we've just created. Now we've got a choice to top it off with. I've got used compost here, so compost that I'd previously grown in. You can use that to top it off, or you can use fresh compost. This is straight from my compost pile, the stuff that I harvested last week. So there we go, a compost pile raised bed planter that's ready to plant in a matter of minutes. I mean, this is the way I've set these beds up, these planters up, and this bath up. This year I was a little bit more prepared, so I did this over winter. But let's get these into position, and I'll talk about how I position these pots. I mean, the way we've always dried our clothes is on washing lines. One of the ugliest things that we've had in our garden is the washing line. So what I've done is I've turned my washing line into this. So I've got one of these spinny washing lines, so the wind spins it. But at the bottom what I've got is I've taken a big container, and instead of concreting this thing into the ground, I've put it into a pot. Some plastic's blown in over winter, let's get that out. But into this pot, the first bit is filled with cement to hold this, to anchor this into place, but the rest is compost and growing medium. And in here I've got flowers, perennial flowers planted in here. I've got foxgloves to attract bees. What else have I got? I've got mustards, I've got more chard, rainbow chard. So I've got a mix of edibles and perennials in here. I wouldn't go on plants that are too high or that are going to get too high, because when you're hanging your clothes out, they're going to interfere. So you want low growing crops. So I've even got dandelions in here. Now I'm going to leave a couple of dandelions in, because what I want is they're going to be some of the first flowers of the season, and they're going to just feed the pollinators. But any of these other perennial weeds or any other weeds that are popping up, they can come out, tidy some of these flowers up. You could use scissors, you could use secateurs for it, or you could just do what I'm doing and just be a little bit rough. You don't have to be perfect with these things. That's the thing. Do you know, when you're growing, you don't have to be perfect. I mean, that is okay. That's okay for me. I'm just moving. Oh, it's heavy. So in this back container, what I've got is I've got blueberries. So these are a perennial. They take a long time to fruit, so they get pushed to the back. We still want access to it because we're going to have to weed. So that's why these containers are quite good, because they're movable. But we'll give it a little weeding, because we've got some weeds. We've got some weeds growing in there and bits of grass. If you wanted to, you could give this a top dressing of compost or well-rotted manure and get it into good stead for the growing season. Now look at this, I've got garlic planted in here. You'll notice that in all my pots and in all my beds, I've got either some kind of garlic or some kind of onion growing in them. I like to use smelly plants as a pest deterrent, so always dot in some plants that smell. It'll just disguise it'll just disguise your cash crop and deter some of those pests. Now, one of the advantages of having these sort of concrete gardens on concrete is there's a lot of residual heat. Now over here I've got overwintered coriander. It's not looking in the best of conditions, but there's enough there for us to be picking at and using to cook. We've been able to pick that throughout winter, and the way we've protected that is we've just allowed the soil level in the container to drop. We haven't top dressed it. It's gone through that sort of process. Remember that process, as it breaks down, the soil level will drop, and you will have to top it up through the season. But this one, we haven't topped it up. We've just allowed it to drop, and then you've got the sides protecting it from the winds. And then I take a piece of plastic and I just pop it over the top, and in effect I've got a mini greenhouse. I've got a box that I grow carrots in. There's one that's left over, and but things like carrots, they're grown. I grow these in a completely separate way to that. This is just a mix of sharp sand and compost. So with carrots, you don't want nutritious soil. You don't want nutritious soil at all. They just want some growing medium. They'll do the work themselves. Look, bits of plastic everywhere. I'll top dress that. I'll top dress that pile, and I'll give it a little, and I'll just plant into the top of it. And 14 inches, plenty of space for carrots. And I always find carrots do better in containers for me because they don't suffer from pests as much. One problem we will have is as soon as you set a bed like that up, is you're going to have cats coming in here and using it as a litter tray. Here's one thing that I've done with this bed is to stop the cats from using it as a toilet. They've just covered it with compost, and that also stops some of the rains drenching it and washing the nutrients out. There's a little practical guide on how you can grow food for hardly any money in a tight little space, and it's a little way of making a change, and it's a little way of getting an introduction into growing food. So you can even introduce trees into the mix. So I've got a load of dwarf fruit trees over here, and let's get them into the position as well. So you can have your mix of annuals and your perennials, and all in a tiny growing space. I've missed the timing on pruning these, but if you prune these right, you can grow them in as compact little plants. Not having access to a massive amount of space shouldn't stop you from growing something. I'm a firm believer of growing at least some portion of your food, whether it's on a tiny scale like this or on a large farm. We'll show you through the season how much food we get off this spot, one little spot. Thanks Blue and Digwell for tagging us in this collaboration. There's a list of channels in the description of this video who have also participated in this small garden growing. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe for regular updates. If you'd like to support our channel, why not become a patron? And I'll see you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.